to you. We'll talk about multivariates data analysis. Multivariates variable from a business perspective, essential requirement process is effective knowledge, management and creation. But a dart of the knowledge help to improve the decision making step. It required more complex multivariate statistical techniques to convert these data to knowledge. Several advanced techniques help to apply multivariates technique. Even the most important development in computer software and hardware, it is assist in the quick analysis, accurate results. So multivariates analysis, and we can also consider because of the technological advancement in multivariate analysis we can get quick analyze and accurate result. Multivariates variable refer to all statistical technique that simultaneously analyze multiple measurement of individual or objective under the investigation. The root of multivariates technique based on univariate and bivariate statistic. Let's talk about the what is the univariate and what is the bivariate. If we talk about the univariate statistics, that is summarized only one variable at one time. Bivariate statistic compare two variable. Multivariate statistic compare more than two variables. If we talk about variate, the building block of multivariate analysis is variate. In factor analysis, variate are formed to best represent the underlying structure of pattern of the variable as represented by their intercorrelation. The researcher must define the measurement type, non-metric or metric. What is the non-metric? That is which is not measured by the numerically, and metric which can measure by numbers. For each variable to the computer result shows an impact on what the data represent and how the data can be analyzed. Let's discuss non-metric data. It is described type of kind by having a particular feature. All other features are excluded and these properties are described. For example, if the person is male, he cannot be female. Non-metric measures can be made either nominal or ordinal scale. Before discussing nominal and ordinal scale, first we will clear the scale. Scale it used to represent usually quantitative and item, person, even place spectrum. We'll discuss nominal scale. This scale is the simplest scale, also known as the lowest order scale. In this scale, letter number is assigned as a label. For example, player t-shirt. A nominal scale is a measurement scale in which numbers serve as a tag or label only to identify, classify an object. The measurement normally deal only with non-metric quantitative variables or where numbers have no value. Ordinal scale define the order relationship according to the magnitude. It shows knowledge about interval. For example, rating scales ranks customer satisfaction, rating and degree socioeconomic status, and education qualification. In ordinal scale, every subject and object can be compared with another term that is greater than and less than. Metric measurement scale. In contrast to non-metric data, metrics are measures of quantitative assessment commonly used for comparing and tracking performance or production. Metrics can be used in a variety of scenarios. Metrics are heavily relied on the financial analysis of companies by both internal manager and external stakeholder. Two different type of scale. Number one, interval scale, and the second, ratio scale. If we talk about the internal scale, that is a quantitative measurement scale where there is a order. The difference between the two variable is meaningful and equal, and the presence of the zero is arbitrary. Is measures variable that exist along the common scale at equal intervals. A simple example of metric scale is a Celsius temperature scale. It is an interval scale. When given temperature in Celsius, you can tell exactly what is the warmer and what is the colder. Also, the interval between 10 Celsius and 20 Celsius is equal to the interval between 30 Celsius and 40 Celsius. A ratio scale. It is the highest order scale as well as a complex. A ratio scale is a quantitative scale where there is a true zero and equal interval between neighboring points. Unlike on an interval scale, a zero on a ratio scale means there is a total absence of variables you are measuring. Length, area, and population are example of ratio scale. Let's talk about different type of scale is important for main two reasons. Number one is non-metric data are not incorrectly used in the metric data and vice versa. Second, which multivariate technique are the most appropriable in data with consideration both type of variable, that is dependent variable as well as independent variables. Summit scale where several variables are joined but all the variables representing different facts of the concept obtain more well-rounded perspective. For example, for measuring the satisfaction in summit scale develop combined several scales of satisfaction the comprised overall satisfaction. Type of statistical error and power. There is a number one alpha, the probability of committing a type of one error, rejecting the null hypothesis when it is actually true, is called a alpha. The other name is the level of statistical significance alpha error occurred when the null hypothesis is erroneously rejected. Beta, a type second error, occur in a hypothesis test when failed to reject the null hypothesis. When it actually is false, the probability of committing this type of error is called the beta level of test, typically denoted as B. Impact of statistical power, alpha power by three factors. Number one, effect size. Number two, alpha A. And third, sample size. If we talk about the effect size, that is, it is based on the actual correlation between variable. It is assist the researcher whether the observe the relationship difference or correlation is meaningful. Alpha A become more restricted. Conventional guidelines suggest that alpha level of 0.5 or 0.1. Researchers should consider the impact of particular level of power before selecting the alpha level. Sample size. A sample size increase, researcher must decide if its power of too higher, it means increase the sample size. A classification of multivariates technique. The classification based on three judgment the research must make about the research objective and natural of the data, the nature of data. Number one, can variable divided into dependent and independent classification based on sum theory? If they can, how many variables treated as a dependent in a single analysis? How are the variables both dependent and independent measured? Dependent technique. The difference variable technique can be categorized by two characteristics. Number one, the number of dependent variable, and second, the type of measurement scale employed by the variable. Independent technique, the variable cannot be classified by either dependent or independent. Instead, all the variables are the analysis simultaneously in an effort to find underlying structure to the entire set of variable or subject. If the structure of variable to be analyzed, then factor analysis or confirmatory factor analysis is appropriate technique. If case and respondent are be grouped to represent structure, the cluster analysis is selected. Final, if the interest is the structure of the object, then the technique of perpetual mapping should be applied. As with the dependent technique, the measurement properties of technique should be considered generally factor analysis and cluster. Type of multivariates techniques. This is ever expanding a set of data analysis that encompasses that wide range of possible research solution. Number one, principal component and common factor analysis. Second, multiple regression and multiple correlation. Third, multiple discriminant analysis, and logical regression. Number 4, canonical correlation analysis. Number 5, multivariates analysis of variance and covariance. Number 6, conjoint analysis. Number 7, cluster analysis. Number 8, perceptual mapping, also known as multidimensional scaling. Number 9, correspondent analyze. Number 10, structure equation modeling and confirmatory factor analysis. If we talk about the principal component and common factor analysis, will discuss factor analysis, including both principal factor analysis and common factor analysis, a statistical approach to use to analyze the interrelationship of a large number of variables and explain the common underlying dimension. For example, a researcher can use it to understand the relationship between the customer rating of the fast food restaurant. Assume you ask the customer to rate the restaurant of the following six variables. Number 1, food taste, food temperature, freshness, waiting time, cleanliness, and number 6, find line of employment. This analysis would like to combine into smaller numbers by analyzing the customer response. The analyzing might find that the variable food test temperature and freshness combined to from a single factor of the food quality, and other remaining that variable that the waiting time, cleanliness, and friendly friend lines of employees to combine other single factor service quality. Let's talk about the multiple regression and multiple correlation. Multiple regression is a statistical technique that can be used to analyze the relationship between a single dependent variable and several independent variables. The objective of multiple regression analysis is to use the independent variable whose value are known to predict the value of single dependent value. Multiple regression analysis is the most appropriate method when the researcher problem involves the single metric dependent variable presumed to be related to a more metric independent variable. The object of the multiple regression analysis is the change in both variable. Whenever a researcher predicting the size of amount of the dependent variable, then multiple regression is useful. For example, monthly expenditure of dining out dependent variable might be predicted from information regarding the family income, its size, and age of the hand. Multiple discriminant analysis and logical regression. This is the appropriate multivariate technique. Primarily objective of this variable is to understand group differences. Appropriate when dependent variable is categorical and dependent variable are matrix. Multiple discriminant analysis is a technique that distinguish data set from each other based on the characteristic observed by the professional. Second, it is used in a finance to compress the variance between the securities while screening for several variables. Discriminant analysis is a multivariate technique used to separate two or more group of observation individuals based on the variable measurement on each experiment unit sample and find the contribution of each variable in separating the group. Variable defines simple relationship between the set of dependent variable and the set and independent variable. Canonical correlation analysis, the variable defined the simple relationship between the set of dependent variable and the set of independent variable. For example, assume a company conduct a study that collect information on its service qualities based on answer 50 metrically measurement. This study used questions from published service qualities of world-class companies and including benchmarking information on the perception of service qualities of the world-class company as well as the research being conducted. Canonical correlation could be used to compare the perception of world-class companies. The researcher then could conclude Whether the perception of the company is correlated are those the world class companies, the technique would provide information on the overall correlation of the perception as well as the correlation between each of the 50 questions. Multivariate analysis of variance and covariance. It used to simultaneously explore the relationship between the several categorical independent variables, usually referred to the treatment of two and more dependent variables. It represents of univariate analysis of variance. It is useful when researchers design an experimental situation manipulation of several non-metric treatments variable to test hypotheses concerning the variance in the group responses on two or more matrix dependent variable. Conjoint analysis is the form of statistical analysis that firms use to market research to understand how customers value different components or features of their product or services. Cluster analysis. Cluster analysis is a data analysis technique that explores the naturally occurring groups within the data set known as the cluster. Cluster analysis doesn't need to group data points into any predefined groups, which means that it is an unsupervised learning method. The hierarchical cluster analysis follows three basic steps. Number one, calculating the distance. Second, link the cluster. Third, choose a solution by selecting the right number of cluster. An example of cluster analysis would be if a company wanted to use this technique in order to find new market to target. The company could collect data on potential customer income, recent home purchases and location. Cluster analysis would then be used to group the data point together and look for the pattern. Perceptual mapping, also known as multidimensional scaling.